Committee of the Whole Board meeting for October 25th. Ms. Hutchison, will you please call the roll?
Here.
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 Here. Ms. Blattner, will you lead us in the pledge? All right, Board, I need a motion and a second to suspend the rules and adjourn to a workshop setting.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Long, second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Kulovitz. Ms. Hutchison, will you please call the roll?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. We have two topics tonight. Dr. Schuler, would you introduce our first topic?
I certainly will. So this is the committee of the whole meeting where Mrs. Murphy brings to the board a report on our district and school, report cards, and I won't really steal the thunder because she can provide kind of the background on when those will officially be released and posted, but I'm going to hand the floor over to Melissa. Go ahead.
Good evening. So tonight is the annual presentation of the district dashboard metrics and important components from the Illinois School Report Card, which will be released on October 30th. I am taking a bit of a different approach to the presentation than I've done in the past. Instead of walking through every single slide, I am going to highlight 6 key areas. If the board does have the desire to talk about others, please let me know, but I felt like there were 6 key areas that were most important to focus on. Those are K1 reading. Dr. Salagi is then going to speak about primary behavior. We're going to also talk about middle school, both the reading and ELA and math, high school, math and English proficiency, advanced coursework, and some information on the Illinois School Report Card. So, jumping into, this stopped working. Oh, nope, we're good. Okay. Okay, so jumping into FastBridge reading. As a reminder, there are 2 types of assessments that are in the FastBridge suite. They are early reading, which our K1 students take, and A reading, which is given to our 2nd through 8th graders, but also our 1st graders in the spring only. And so, and these are given 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring. I report out the spring data to you on your dashboard. So here you'll see those results. The dark blue are last year's results, and the red bar is our Vision 2026 goal. And so this is the percentage of students that score at or above the 50th percentile in reading. And so the reason why we only have 1 year of information from K1 is because last year was the first year that our students took early reading. So last year was a baseline year for that. You're going to see why I specifically picked K1 to talk more about, because we certainly would like to see those results look higher. So I'm going to dive into K1 specifically. Okay, so this is orientation to the early reading assessment. So the FastBridge early reading assessment has 13 different subtests. 4 of those subtests are given at different points of each testing period, and we follow FastBridge recommendations for that. Those assessments are determined by the developmental stages of reading. And you're going to see, too, they're all about foundational skills. It's really important to know that each of these assessments are given in a timed setting. So students have 1 minute for that assessment for each of those different components. Little bit of a deeper dive into this assessment too. So we also administered for our first graders the A reading assessment. Now, A reading is a broader assessment. It includes foundational skills, but it also includes reading passages and comprehension. And so the results for that assessment actually looked better than the 46%. First graders in the spring there were 56% of them that are at or above the 50th percentile. I also include another piece of information here, which is that 71%. I think that's a really important data point because we're always looking at two components on FastBridge. We're looking at the percentage of students at or above the 50th percentile because that says they're secure with grade level information. But we're also looking at what FastBridge considers, hey, you can learn within the Tier 1 core curriculum without additional interventions. And so that's that second set of results where we had 71% of the first graders score in that Tier 1 range. The goal is 80%. So we still have some room to grow there from last spring. I included this image here because for those of us in the reading field that have really gotten into the science of reading, this is like the big image that goes with the science of reading. They talk about reading as it's such a complex skill to learn because it takes into account so many different skills. And they call this the reading rope. So it includes language comprehension and word recognition. When we're talking about the early reading assessment, that one where it's the timed assessment, that's only the blue part of the rope. That's only the word recognition components. And if you look really closely at that, underneath that blue part of the rope, it says increasing automaticity. And that's why it's that 1 minute timed assessment, because they're looking to see automaticity for our students. But we also need to keep in mind the other side of the rope, that orange and that red part, because the language part is so important too. And so that's why I believe we see some different results on A reading, which are a little higher because our students have strong language skills that they're applying to their reading. And so when I think about that K1 to time period, it's really about growth over time. It's about developing those foundational skills, but it's also about developing those language skills. Both are really important. You may remember at the last committee of the whole, I talked to the board about bookworms. I gave you a lot of information about what that curriculum looks like, the strong foundational skills component, and I also talked to you about the work that was done last year with second grade and how that was a grade level our teams really targeted specifically because we know how important it is for students to be secure by the time they're in third grade. And so I go back to this because our results last year were very good for second grade. And so I have confidence that the work we're going to be doing in bookworms is really going to be targeting exactly what our students need. The main lever for K2 is strong Tier 1 instruction. And that comes with our bookworms instructional materials. They address both foundational skills and grade level foundational skills and targeted foundational skills. And our students are being assessed every 3 to 6 weeks on measuring their progress, and we're adjusting their instructional needs. Just the only component we have to keep in mind is when our teachers are doing that bookworms assessment, it's not in a time setting. We're looking for mastery of those skills, but the early reading just adds that component of a time setting. So we are continuing to study those results because last year was really our baseline year for that.
I'm just going to talk briefly about primary behavior. I know this is a student learning presentation, but behavior and learning goes together, and especially at the primary level. And so as we're talking about K2 learning, it is really important to message that early on we've recognized post 2020, 2021, we've seen an increase in behaviors really in our kindergarten, first grade, a little bit of our second grade area. And so I just want to talk a little bit about the things we're doing, because ultimately we're talking about educating the whole child. And when kids are well behaved, when there's high expectations and clear expectations for behavior, you typically see an increase in learning too. They kind of go seamlessly together. So Melissa, if you can go ahead and click on the next one there. Nope, go back one more. So I want to start with what do we do, or what have we implemented just prior to our students becoming kindergartners, right, before they enter our classrooms. We have our early childhood programming, clearly through Jefferson, but in addition to that, you may remember previously we've had the Early Learning Collaborative come out and speak to us. We hold 100 slots within our schools, preschool slots. We actually host the space at different sites for at-risk students. This year, once we filled all those slots, we worked together with our business office, the Early Learning Collaborative, and Jefferson to have any of those students that are on a wait list to actually come to Jefferson. Previous years, we've had a lot of those students on a wait list. We are now getting them into Jefferson. So if they're in either the early learning program through the preschool expansion grant, or if they're with us, we're getting more students in, which means typically when students get comfortable in a school setting, you're less apt to see significant behaviors. And we're getting those students in at a really cost-effective way as well. So that we think is going to be a significant bonus for our kids moving forward. Also at the kindergarten level, before our kids walk in, 2 other things we're doing. This year we added a valid and reliable parent screening questionnaire that screens for potential significant rises in behavior, helps us flag different pieces, and then work closely with parents when we think about class placement. And then we hosted over 80 students in our Camp Kinder program. So Camp Kinder, again, is designed for students who have not had any preschool experience. We brought 80 students in the summer. It's a week-long camp around really targeting behavior and getting kids comfortable in the setting. Now, our hope is with our first strategy that I talked about, we won't have to have as many kids in Camp Kinder because we'll have more and more kids in preschool. In addition, in the primary behavior space, we've put a lot of time and effort into training. In September, we trained all of our elementary buildings on our Tier 1 foundational behavioral practices. Part of that training was actually having all of our schools bring leadership teams to an initial workshop that was a day long, run by our behavioral specialists, our school psychology department chair, and myself. And then on the Institute day, we did the full day training for the entire district. In addition to that, we have specific specialists that are trained in crisis prevention and intervention training. And then we have specific training for individual students as well as part of their individual education plans or behavior plans. And so what does all that mean? What does that mean on the backside? So the first 2 kind of pieces I talked about were preventative. What are we doing before kids walk in our door? What are we doing in preschool? What are we doing training-wise? But it means that within our classrooms, 1, we start with a really, really clear expectation for behavior. We teach those expectations, and we seek to manage our classrooms really well. All of our schools have significant disruption protocols, so we clearly identify behaviors that could disrupt the learning environment significantly, and we have a clear response process to that all of our staff are trained on and are familiar with, that we do to respond, because one piece that can happen is behaviors can get in the way of learning. We have specific behavior intervention plans that really run the gamut of the spectrum to really, really significant and intensive to less intensive for individual students. And then student discipline is a part of our response process also. And when I say progressive, that means if there are conflicts or there's issues with student behavior, one response that we do have and that we do utilize is progressive student discipline, even for our youngest students. But we know that that's not the only response, and that's not the only way to change behavior. Working with parents is really important. We have specific behavioral specialists. And then it is important to mention that over this past year, we have increased our special education programming, specifically our instructional level programming. So these are programs where students are needing more intensive services than just in the general education classroom or what the school or resource level can provide. So we've seen an increase in those programs that we've had to house here in the district to really meet the needs of our students, whether they be behaviorally or academically, or behaviorally and or academically. But I will tell you, many of those programs are housing. We're seeing some more significant behaviors, but we're also identifying the supports to go in place there. So I wanted to give an overview of some of the focus we've had on primary behavior. Many of those pieces are really post 2020, 2021, because we do have that recognition that really the learning and the behavior goes hand in hand.
To round out this conversation about K1 reading, I also just wanted to highlight the other component to FastBridge is the growth component. So the growth component is really important because that's measuring progress towards that proficiency. And so we do get growth metrics from fall to winter and fall to spring. What we report out on the dashboard is fall to spring. This is the first time we're going to report growth on the dashboard. And so based on research from FastBridge, we're looking for at least 60% of the students to meet the targeted growth. And so here it's broken out by grade level bands. And so you can see that 45% with K1. That's obviously drawing our attention, that increased focus on primary early reading is really this is a big area of focus for our team this year, and we have the right materials in place to help support that. I want to draw your attention to this as well because this is the growth broken out by different subgroups. These are the subgroups that the State Board of Education identifies and reports data out by, so we do the exact same. You can see the variance as well in growth for some of our priority subgroups. That stands out. Okay. And so rounding out the information that will sit on your dashboard for FastBridge, particularly this year, you can see we now have 2 additional metrics that will be filled in with the early reading metric and the growth metric. And so you can see what the dashboard looked like just last week and what it looks like now, and how that has changed for each K1, 2, 5, 6, 8, and the overall growth. Okay, so the next area I want to spend time on is IAR. In particular, I want to speak to middle school. And so here you're going to see the percentage of students that met or exceeded on the ELA IAR assessment. So the lighter blue was 2022 and the darker blue is this past year. So certainly something to celebrate. Elementary, we saw a nice increase, but tonight I'm really spending time talking about that hard work of the middle school and the achievement that they had. So really significant increase for our middle school students and results on IAR. So the slide I wanted to go to was this one right here. So last year when I did this presentation, I spent time talking to the board about the middle school writing results, and I spoke to you about how this was the reality. 27% of our students in grades 6 through 8 met or exceeded on that writing portion of IAR. A significant amount of work was done last year. I have to credit Dr. Ozymkowski, really led these efforts with our middle school. She's here tonight. Worked with our middle school teams. They really increased the amount of writing that our students were doing, not just in ELA, but all of the content areas, and it paid off. We went from 27% of students meeting or exceeding on that writing part of the test to 64% of students meeting or exceeding on the writing portion, and that actually matches the reading portion. So overall, the reading and the writing scores really matched. And so that was a huge celebration for our teams for their hard work on that. So here you'll see really exciting to update these parts of the dashboard and the results on the IAR last year for both elementary and middle school. Okay, so moving into math, again, I want to talk about middle school in particular. So here's the same type of slide I showed you for FastBridge for reading. Now I'm showing you the same slide, FastBridge for math. And it's the same grade level bands, K1, 2, 5, 6, 8, with the dark blue being this past year. Again, early math, that was the first time we were administering that assessment, so that's why you see that bar for the first time there. And you see the red is our goal with Vision 2026. Here, I think it's important to point out we have more consistency in the results between the different grade level bands, but I do want to draw the attention to middle school. They saw a nice uptick there from 61% of students at or above the 50th percentile to 64%. And then with the FastBridge growth, here's that breakout by grade level bands. Now again, as a reminder, FastBridge, the research from FastBridge says at least 60% of students meeting their that targeted growth. Here we're closer for both elementary and middle school for that growth. And then I also want to point out by subgroup. Here, our subgroups look much closer. There's not as much discrepancy between some of those priority subgroups and the all group. And so this was certainly a celebration when we were looking at this data as an administrative team to see more consistency across each of those subgroups. So rounding out how the dashboard will be updated for K-8 math, specific to FastBridge, you'll see again, first time we have data for early math and for the growth, and then the updates there for elementary and for middle school. So I'm also going to talk about the results from IAR. And so here you see those results for grades 3 through 5, the percentage of students meeting or exceeding on IAR for the last 2 years, and for 6 through 8. And here again, these are actually like really nice increase for middle school, we thought. You know, certainly when we saw the elementary results, we were hoping to see that it would be above the previous year. I do want to speak to why did we see increases in middle school and not at elementary. Some things that I want to point out would be, first and foremost, now remember our middle school teachers last year were engaged in a pilot. They did a pilot of 2 high quality instructional materials, and after they made the selection of IM, they spent the rest of the year using IM materials, and a majority of our middle school teachers were involved in that pilot. There is a difference between a middle school math teacher and elementary teacher. Middle school math teacher has that content area expertise, and they teach the same lesson multiple times a day. Their rate of improvement in teaching is multiplied, and they're focused on one content area. Our elementary folks are focused on multiple content areas, and they have 1 shot a day at that lesson, and then they wait a whole year to do that lesson again. As I reported to you at the last meeting, we're hearing really good things from our staff about the start of this year. They're feeling definitely more comfortable, and we're expecting to see more accelerated achievement and growth in elementary this year. But a celebration for middle school for that increase as well. Okay, so I'm actually going to save this for a little bit later. Okay. So here you're going to see the dashboard metrics from what they looked like for last year and what they look like for this year. Okay, I'm going to move into our high school metrics. Again, I wanted to highlight 3 high school metrics. When we think about our high school metrics, we actually have little markers all along the way from freshman year to the time they graduate. I'm going to spend time talking to you about 3 of the metrics from our seniors. They're the advanced coursework, the math proficiency, and the English proficiency. So so advanced coursework. So as a reminder, what is this metric? So this metric includes graduates that earn a C or higher in advanced coursework and or earn an industry recognized credential. So for coursework, that's AP or dual credit. Now, we have really increased the number of dual credit courses we have. The very first time I did this presentation in 2019, we had 1 course. Now we have 15. And we actually added 6 this year, and I listed all of those out. I also have to recognize our partners at TCD. They've really worked hard with COD to increase the courses to being dual credit with COD, and working very hard to get students who are registered at COD, at TCD, enrolled in the dual credit version and meeting the dual credit requirements for that course. So we certainly saw an uptick this year because of those 2 efforts. So here you'll see that we did have an increase in the percentage of students that met that criteria for advanced coursework, which increased by 2%. I have to say I was very excited about this because I've reported this metric multiple times, and it's just kind of held steady every single time. And so it's certainly exciting for me to report that we had an uptick. And that was really, again, I just want to credit again that increase in the percentage of offerings for dual credit and the partnership with TCD and the work that they've done with dual credit as well. So math and English proficiency. So let me orient you to what this is. So this metric comes from the College and Career Readiness Indicator set by the Illinois State Board of Education. And they have targets that define students as college and career ready in English and math. And that can be met by a set of criteria. It can be met through a course, or it can be met through an exam. The courses listed there are AP courses, dual credit, transitional courses, and for math, Algebra 2. Could also be met through an exam score, and you can see what's listed there for ACT. You can see what's listed there for SAT. You can see what's listed there for AP. I really do want to point out, when we're talking about those exam scores in math, it's not just the score, they also have to be enrolled in a 4th year of math. You probably remember we had a lot of conversations about targeting and identifying students that could benefit from a 4th year of math. And so this is really exciting to report as well. Last year, this was something that we spent a lot of time talking about as a high school team. The 69% wasn't where we wanted to be. Our teams put in a tremendous amount of effort in working with our students, and it's great to report that 80% of our students met that proficiency target in math. Our teams put a lot of work in making sure, specifically with Algebra 2, making sure more students were passing Algebra 2. ELA proficiency, though, doesn't have the same story, and this is an area of focus for us this year. So we did see a decline, but I think it's important, before I explain a little bit more about that, I go back. This is really important for you to understand. The options for English are not as robust as the options for math for multiple reasons. We have AP. We now have dual credit, college composition. We We actually have 177 students enrolled in college composition this year, but that was not for the class of 23. We do not have transitional English. There's actually going to be a proposal coming to you in November, course proposal for transitional English. And there isn't an equivalent to Algebra 2 with English. So we're really working with less criteria for students to meet that proficiency, but we've been working and building those opportunities for our students. So when you look at that ELA proficiency for this year for the graduating class, you see a decrease. This was due to the SAT results. And so these students, when they were juniors, took the SAT. They were freshmen during that whole COVID time period. So that I believe that had an impact. The class of 24 has higher SAT results. So this result should definitely look better next year. We already know that those SAT results are better, and we have more opportunities for our students. Nonetheless, we are also having conversations with high school teams about focusing in on success for SAT. Okay. And so here you'll see what the dashboard metrics look like this year for the 6 areas for high school. So holding steady with graduation, which is outstanding, holding steady with freshmen on track. We saw the same results, PSAT to SAT growth. We saw that increase in advanced coursework, the dip for English, and then the nice increase for math. I also should have pointed out, we actually already met the Vision 2026 target. We exceeded it for math. So, okay. Last portion of what I was going to highlight, and that has to do with the report card. So I want to talk about IAR growth percentile. This is on the Illinois State report card. And so the state report card reports out growth on a percentile. So they're looking at students' progress compared to peers who started at the same year or the same exact score the year prior. And so then they have a little bit of guidance in terms of what they think is excellent growth, average growth, above average growth, room for improvement, and cause for concern. So I actually, there's a little mistake on here. I just want to point out, I'm apologetic. The years on here should say 2019, 2022, and then 2023. I apologize for that. Little oversight on my part, but we didn't have growth 2020 and 2021 because of COVID, but this year's growth is 63%. And so you can see from 2019 where it was the 39th percentile, then in 2022 last year was 52nd, and now we're at 63rd. So we are very excited about that really incredible increase in ELA growth. That'll be on the report card. Math, again, if you could just make that little edit as well on your sheet, so it'll be 2019, 2022, and then the last one should be 2023. So we held steady this past year to the previous year. We certainly want to see more growth than that, but we should also recognize the first year of an implementation, holding steady is actually something that is to be noted as well, because it was certainly a big lift for our staff. The last area I wanted to highlight is the annual summative designation. And so schools receive an annual summative designation on the report card. That is a combination of lots of different factors. And designation is really important because you fall into certain categories. It could result in additional work that you need to do to move out of that category. So here are the categories. Exemplary is the highest performing 10% of schools. And then I'm going to actually skip over commendable, but go straight to targeted. So targeted is anyone who has a subgroup that is performing similar to the bottom 5%. Comprehensive means you're performing in the lowest 5%. And then commendable is like that last area. You're not in the top 10%, but you have no low performing subgroups. This graphic comes from ISB, and it explains how that summative designation comes together. There are multiple indicators that are reported and calculated together to determine the summative designation. There are academic indicators and school quality and success indicators. So that they look at the same metrics for elementary and middle school, and then high school has a few different components. But here are those summative designations for our schools for this year. Last year we had 2 schools that were exemplary. This year we have 4. And so certainly excited about that. No schools in targeted support, no schools in comprehensive support, and everyone else is in commendable. Okay.
Melissa, can I just point one thing out just
Sure.
of note? So can you go back to the growth target piece? Just for board awareness. So important element of those growth targets, actually one of the major school rankings groups great schools that sits behind all of the real estate sites. So if you go and you buy a house and it brings up a rating to say this is what the school is rating, those are reliant on great schools. I remember back in 2019, that was the first year that they implemented that growth score on the assessment. Great schools made a significant adjustment in that they used that as a major factor in their school rating that sat on those sites. So if you actually go on to any of those sites now, Zillow or any of the real estate sites, our grade school ratings have jumped significantly. Almost all of them have jumped kind of multiple levels, some of our schools as high as 4 levels on that ranking, and that's actually attributed to the growth score and how much weight grade schools puts on it from the school report cards. So wasn't why we obviously did that work, but just pointing that out that we had a fair amount of conversation, I remember, with CAC about that set of rankings, and they all jumped really significantly.
So those were the main areas that I was hoping to dive deeper into, but I'm certainly happy to take any questions about what I presented or any of the other data.
So, Melissa, do you want to just summarize again? I think Juliet asked a question before, but from this, what are the major areas of focus as you reflected on all this data this year?
Great question. Primary reading is a major focus, and English proficiency at the high school, but also continuing the work that we've done in the middle school to have the same success, where it's the writing work and also math implementation.
Board, any questions?
I do.
Go ahead.
Thank you. This is great information. One comment, one thing I really like about the dashboard is the historical trends. Because often when we see these presentations, we see this year's data, and we either have to go dig back through our files or ask questions. So it's really nice to have that centralized. The FastBridge scores, when we talk about FastBridge report scores according to national percentiles. Yeah, thank you. And, is that of those national percentiles, is that population just those using FastBridge?
Yes.
Okay. And how prevalent is FastBridge? Any feel? Like, is it 10%?
It's very large
Okay.
sample that they use
Okay.
for that norm.
Okay, thank you. on the slide that you showed, what you call them, the ropes,
Mm-hmm.
is that based on fast bridge assessments? The E reading, the A reading, I think the answer is yes, but I wanted to verify that.
Yeah, good question. So all of the image is really all of the components that make a skilled reader. FastBridge for early reading focuses on the blue components. That's what
Okay.
it assesses. But for A reading, which our first graders took in the spring and our second through eighth graders take, it assesses all parts of the rope.
Okay.
So A reading is more comprehensive, where it's really studying all the parts that come together to be a skilled reader. And I should have mentioned more, I should have put a finer point on this in my presentation. I'm glad you're asking about this. I specifically called out the A reading results for first grade and them being higher because I think that's a very good thing, that they can put all of the pieces together as a reader.
Okay, thanks. And then, just a comment on slide 26 on page 13. I thought it was interesting where there, there's improvement in each of the grades, but the biggest driver was level 3 to level 4.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know, it makes me wonder, not much change in level 1 and level 2. And, most of the people are in 3 and 4. And while that's good that we're getting better, I just wonder about, ideally we'd like to see that level 1 and level 2 getting smaller.
Absolutely. Can add a little bit to that. So the level 3, and as a reminder, I'll orient everyone a little bit more to this. So to meet or exceed on IAR, you have to score at the level 4 and the level 5. In some states, when that test was first introduced and it was called PARC, a level 3 was also considered meeting standards. So our schools really made a concerted effort last year when we were talking about students who scored on the FastBridge, who scored in that tier 1 range, but they fell in the 30th percentile to the 49th percentile. We made a concerted effort of really thinking about those students and intervening within the classroom. And I actually think it's good news that that shifted, because it means that the instruction they're receiving in the classroom is really meeting their needs. I think we have work to do with our tiered interventions still. And actually, Dr. Moran, that's part of her work this year with math specifically, is our tier 2 intervention. So we've identified that, but I do want to highlight for our students moving from that level 3 to the level 4, that means tier 1 is strong and meeting students' needs to do that.
Okay, thank you. On the next slide after that, just to note the 8th, so this is the IAR, ELA IAR for grade 8. Just that one's a wow when you look at,
Right.
The change there. So that's impressive.
Especially the percentage of students who exceeded, who
Yeah.
had that level 5,
Yeah, and any idea what drove that?
the writing.
Okay.
Can I have a follow-up question on that? Or if it's about the same thing, so I don't want to interrupt you, Dave, but about that same
Yeah, go ahead.
point there. So you see the big rise in the light blue section. How much of that is driven by the fact that the 7th grade 2022 class had a higher light blue section and they become the 8th grade 2023 section? Like how
Great
is
question.
that data teased out?
That's a good question. Here's what I can tell you. I studied the writing results specifically, also by grade level, and so we saw a really big increase on how students performed cohort-wise. from 6th grade to 7th grade, 7th grade to 8th grade. So yes, they did start higher, but they maintained and increased as well.
Right. I think when I was going through this, I got really hung up on, there's a lot of
Cohort.
data in like the cohort, but then when you get to the percentage of growth, you sort of can see a little bit clearer, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to look at it between grade to grade and then cohort. But our team really did spend time, and actually Dr. Schuler was in that meeting when we were talking about the cohort improvement.
And Angela, you're absolutely right, but there is actually pretty significant cohort group as well. So what you're comparing is actually 8.7% of those students in 22 are in the light blue, up to 17.5. So that's the cohort.
Right. And even the dark
Jump.
blue
Yeah.
had a big jump
Yeah.
as well.
So that at least in that top performance level, when you look at how narrow that band generally is, that's a pretty good size cohort.
I actually should highlight as well, our 8th grade scores were some of the strongest, and I think that speaks to the importance of that growth in reading over time, that they increase those skills over time, and 8th grade was very strong.
Page 28, slides 55 and 56, you talked about the ELA proficiency where we dropped a little bit being driven by SAT.
Yes.
The math proficiency where we improved, was that also driven by SAT?
It was somewhat SAT, but mostly the percentage of students passing Algebra 2, but also we had an increase in students who passed transitional math, that course. So we
Okay.
saw a combination, but the largest percentage coming from students who passed Algebra 2, and that was a very focused effort on our school teams to identify students who needed to pass Algebra 2, whether that was through taking that their senior year or credit recovery.
So where we see big growth in some of these subgroups, low income, IEP,
Yes.
and Black and Hispanic, those were driven probably by that coursework more than SAT. And the focus on getting them math before their high school career is over.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, that's good.
Can you clarify credit recovery?
Great question. So credit recovery is when we know a student has received a D or F in a course and they have to retake the entire course or core components of the course that they failed to earn the credit. And so our schools, this is where those academic interventionists that were supported through the ESSER $3 really have made a difference. They have served as the key point people in doing the credit recovery, but also we also had both North and South found additional ways to help students do credit recovery, whether that was over the winter or in June.
But that is in no way a lessening of standards. Those students achieve
Absolutely
full
not.
proficiency.
No, the only reason why I said parts of the course is because our teachers may sit down and say they had mastery of this content in the course. We're not going to spend time redoing that. It's this part of the course they need to redo.
That's all I have, thanks.
I just had two questions. So you, when Dr. Schuler asked, summarize the 3 areas for targeting for next year. Do you have the resources you need to target those areas, or are there resources that are going to be additional that you need to do that work?
Thank you for asking that question. Yes, I believe we do, with the support of the board, in investing in the high quality instructional materials. Investing in the math coaches at the middle school is absolutely critical. And then I believe at the high school we have a lot of support at the high school to do that work too.
And then similar how you kind of, went through and identified the target areas and sort of from a higher level summarize them. Can you do that with the wins? So what are the big picture wins in your view?
I'd love to. Thank you for asking that, because this is I really am proud of the work that our staff have done this past year and the achievements of our students. And so I think we need to call out middle school. both their ELA results and their math results. We should also point out elementary ELA did increase. High school math proficiency was a huge success. Advanced coursework increased. And although these weren't increases, these are still really important that there was no change because the results were already very strong. Graduation rate and freshmen on track. That didn't change, but there's a lot of work that sits behind that to make sure that that does stay and remain such a strong result as well. I hope I didn't miss anything.
Growth.
Growth, thank you. Oh, I should also say, too, the summative designations. We have more schools that are exemplary than we ever have before. And I actually should say, too, I meant to say before, too, with the ELA results, these are the highest ELA results we've ever had on IAR. So.
Had just a couple of questions. Do we have enough history and a perspective on whether the IAR results will translate into a change in the CCRI proficiency? So like when you look up at the fact that the ELA IARs were up almost universally, is that cohort advances? Do we expect it to naturally lift scores?
I'm glad you asked that question. I think we could say yes, as a predictor, it should. Because if students are successful on IAR, they are reading at a high level. That is a complex test. That means they are able to read complex text. They're able to answer comprehension questions. They're able to write to it. And so I do believe as that cohort moves forward, they have skills to be successful on a similar like test as ACT.
And then on the ELA proficiency, there was a tremendous variation among subgroups there compared to everything else. In terms of focus areas, are there any particular thoughts on how to see gains more universally there?
Yes. So some work that we know paid off was when our schools and our courses really embedded within the course like test practice like items for the SAT universally. Actually, Mr. Biskin, you know a lot about that. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so our English area and our math area, those teachers worked really hard at creating questions that were structured in a way that would mimic what they would see on an SAT. So there's high rigor, and then just having that structure in front of them and seeing that over and over again, when they then take the test, they're not stumped by that. I mean, it sort of is a niche skill. So, I reminded you, and I didn't follow. So they structure those in a way where students see those questions. So when they get to that SAT, they then have a better chance of answering those. They're not stumped by the structure of the question.
And we've had conversations about, we know where that worked, and we've had conversations about expanding that.
Eric, I think one more thing that's just important to mention is as you see results coming up through the middle school, that's going to position kids to be in a position to access high-level coursework as they move into college or to high school as well. So, you know, while it's not the only determining factor, certainly results on IAR help to inform where students move into at the high school level, and access to advanced or rigorous coursework is going to help to raise, I think, those outcome results as well.
And then FastBridge results were, I'll say, flat to slightly up in most areas, but significantly below Vision 2026 targets. Do we still believe those targets are achievable given the focus areas you mentioned, or do we think those goals are at risk?
It's a good question. I think we need more data to make that determination. So I think we set those without having a long history of FastBridge results to rely on. We set an ambitious goal because we have high expectations, But I think we're going to have another set of data in the winter that we can look at. We're going to have another set of data in the spring, and I think that's a really good conversation for our administrative team to have.
When I oh, sorry,
No,
go ahead.
no. I was the only thing I was going to say is our fall data. We just looked at it the other day at a full day retreat as well, and our fall data would actually suggest the health of Tier 1 is actually in a really good place as you look, especially across elementary systems. So I think it'd be too early to suggest we can't hit those markers if you look at students that actually are performing and with continued kind of focus and boost, I believe absolutely can get there. But I don't want to suggest to you that we can't hit it yet. I'd really love to see second year of that focused effort around math and new curriculum with the ELA piece coming in, and I think we'll have a better sense.
Well, that's helpful. And I love that we set ambitious goals. We should. And so I guess my challenge is going to be, if we were worried the goal was at risk, somewhat to what Ms. Kulovitz said, is there anything in terms of additional supports that would be needed so that we could still achieve those goals? What would have to be true to still get there?
Mm-hmm.
So just food for thought.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was all I had. Thank you very much. This is great data.
Can I follow up on Eric's question, his last question there? So is the answer to that question, does it include why we have this in the packet?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Chris, do you want to walk through this this chart? So it's a specialist and classroom ratio.
Yeah, just walking you through this here. So really what this breaks down is it's kind of the supports question. So I'm just going to take one school across and just explain it. So we'll take Bauer, for example. The ML category is how many multilingual support staff that they have. And remember, those staff members can support students that qualify for multilingual services. That can be in the classroom or out of the classroom. They can be supporting individual students, groups of students, or co-teaching with a classroom teacher. The reading number is the number of reading coaches and or reading teachers / interventionists. Again, that's a dual role. Similar to ML, obviously serving a different population, but can work with individual students or groups of students or coaching and or in the classroom. Math, again, our math coaches, and that number also includes our math interventionists as well. PACE, we've equipped our staff, that's the number of PACE teachers at each school, and then the class sections is how many general education class sections we have. So then the total number is sections and specialists, and then our student enrollment, and then that's our ratio. Over the far right is our ratio of certified staff to students, not counting our special education ratio. So we keep special education out of it because the rule of thumb is they're use staff to meet the individual education plans that are to be, and those are very individualized. This is really all around general education supports. Does not mean that our special education students do not benefit for this, because our special education students are in the general education classroom usually for the majority of the time in our classroom settings. So those ratios, as you can see, really if you break it down a little bit by need, you think about some of our schools that may have a higher multilingual demographic, such as Johnson. You see that they have a lower total ratio as well. So you see there's increased support. So when we really look at supporting classrooms, it's not just a class size discussion, but it's a class size discussion plus how do we support classroom teachers, how do we support individual students, and maybe the third point to this too, and we've heard this data point over and over in a positive sense, we had some really significant growth 2019 to 2022 recognized through some studies around the pandemic. That's a time when we really poured into getting these supports in place and centralizing them, and we've seen some great growth during the time. So yeah, it's kind of it in a nutshell. And if you looked at this comparatively pre-pandemic or 2019, 2020, majority of our ratios are either at or below where they were before.
I'm just going to add on to what Dr. Slaggy said in terms of like areas of watch. I believe our multilingual population and the large increase in students that are considered newcomers, or in fact, I'm looking at a chart here right now of our students who are what's considered a level 1 or a level 2 from that access test, which is their beginning language acquisition. I think that's an area that we're really watching closely because we've seen a lot of increases in that, and I think that's a conversation that we've had multiple times here at this table, right? So
Thank you. You actually read my mind. My question was, what did it look like pre-pandemic? So it seems that with ELA for elementary, we made some nice gains, but with math, a little more sluggish. Do we have enough support with math? Because I know coming next year when COVID funds run out, there's going to be decisions to be made. Is the tiny decrease in the score at the elementary level, does that have to do with the implementation of the new curriculum? I think.
yeah, I think it was. I think that it was a large lift for our teachers. So I believe after 1 year, you're going to see more acceleration in that area.
So we're not concerned that it's the change in curriculum. Then.
No.
I mean, we don't have enough.
Especially, I think the beauty of it is that our middle school is using the exact same curriculum, and we saw nice increases there. So we have no concerns about what we selected. It was just a large lift for our folks. And going through that curriculum after 1 year, we are already hearing reports from our staff about feeling much more comfortable, and we are seeing our students be more successful already.
At the elementary level, would more
Yes.
math coaches have been helpful or be helpful going forward?
I think there's a couple of schools that we have our eye on for additional support in math.
Thank you. I had one other question. Can you just explain what transitional math and English is at the high school level?
Yes, thanks for asking that. Transitional math is a course that we currently have. Transitional English is a course I'm going to bring to you next month for consideration. These are courses that are designed so that when students take them while they're within our district, if they earn a passing grade, they can automatically be enrolled into post-secondary education without having to take a remedial course. And so they can automatically enter into credit-bearing coursework, which we know saves them significant time.
Okay, thank you.
It's
You-
And
important
funds
to know
and
bo-
money.
Both of those had to be developed with with College of DuPage. So you can only develop a transitional math and English course with your local community college because that is often the focus. So where we see the highest level of need for remedial coursework at the college level are students that transition to COD and get placed into a non-credit bearing class, and that kind of impacts. So this is a path their senior year that will get them out of that path as they move to COD. They COD cannot place them in a non-credit bearing class
If they pass the transitional
if they
math
have
class.
passed that class.
So they don't even have to go through the math placement exam at COD?
Because that's a part
No.
of that class
Okay.
experience.
And so our teams worked very hard this summer in developing the transitional English.
Did have one more question. And maybe two. And it's a little more to Chris. So the increased instructional special ed programming, how is that, like, are those scores reflected here? Like, if we have more kids who are in those instructional settings, do they all take separate
It depends.
assessments?
Yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
So if they will be taking a assessment called the DLM, that's the alternative state assessment to IAR. If they're a student who meets that profile to take that assessment, then they're not taking the fast bridge, and you didn't see their results either because they're not included in the IAR results.
Okay, thank you. So are any of the increased instructional classrooms solely for behavioral, social, emotional needs, or is it also academic?
Yeah, it's a great question. What we're seeing it's a combination, right? So while there may be specific disabilities, students potentially with autism, you may have some academic deficits, but you're also having some behavioral and maybe social emotional concerns. You could see both. Our increase in programming has been that combination, but it's certainly been an increase on the behavioral regulation side as well. Like that's where at the primary level, it's been a driver of it. But because of that behavioral side of it, you have some academic deficiencies as well because you're not able to access your education fully or successfully without ample supports.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Back to the specialist classroom support. So the multilingual specialists, you said those are the special, they do not cover any of the special education in those buildings?
They do,
They do, okay.
yes.
But the rest of the specialists list here aren't regular education students.
Multilingual specialists cover special ed. Was that the
Yeah, they could work with special education
correct.
students.
in instructional classrooms?
Yeah. But you're asking, are they
Well, I thought you said that the specialists listed on the paper here were only for that special ed specialists were separate, but
what I would
I might be.
So here, maybe, yeah, and I apologize for this. So,
No.
we have not included special education staffing in here because it is so individualized to the student. It wouldn't necessarily reflect the need of the entire building. It's just dependent upon whatever that student's individual needs are. However, all of these staff members can work with with students whether or not they have an individual special education plan or not. So there could be a student that has an IEP, but they have a multilingual need, ML could work with them. There could be a student in PACE that has an IEP that the PACE teacher could work with. Does that make
Yes,
Yeah.
that helps. Thank you.
you bet?
What did you say the alternative test was?
It's called the DLM.
DLM. And do we track change in performance against the DLM, and do we have goals set against that?
We do look at it from year to year. It's a really, really small percentage of our students that take that assessment. And it also factors in students who are in an outplaced setting as well. We haven't set goals for the DLM in the past, but
Thank
Any other questions? I do have one. I hate to over-index on any one thing, but when I look at the PSAT to SAT growth, there's the two reportable subgroups that just seem significant, and if you can give me some context and maybe set our expectation on any actions we should take related to those subgroups. How should we interpret that? I mean, I don't want to. Is that a clear question?
I think
Talking about Black and Hispanic, right?
Right.
Subgroups are reported.
yeah. And then your question really is, what else?
How should we think about that, right? I don't want to over-index on that, but is there some, as a layperson, that seems significant? I just need to know how to think about it and actions that we as a district might take or should take.
Yeah, when I start to look at this subgroup data over and over again, I continue to talk to our teams about priority subgroups. Whether I'm having the conversation just about this PSAT to SAT growth or I'm having it about the K1 data, I continue to say, hey, there are some priority subgroups that are disproportionate to some
Right,
other groups.
Right.
And so I continue to have the conversations with our teams, first and foremost, about strong Tier 1 instruction. First and foremost, that's the biggest lever to make sure our students are all successful. Making sure that we are teaching grade level standards, we have high expectations, and we're helping our students achieve that high expectation. That's first and foremost. When we look at that Hispanic subgroup, a lot of the, not all, but there's a lot of the students that also fall into the multilingual subgroup too. And we are having a lot of conversations about scaffolds and supports that are specific to multilingual learners especially in math, because our IM curriculum comes with those supports. And we're talking about it as well with other implementations, especially in English too, and it's part of the school improvement plans. So I feel like the best approach to really working on addressing this is making sure that that tier 1 instruction is really solid, and looking at that student growth as well in the classroom assessments. That's another really key component.
Right.
Is making sure, and I think it's actually hanging up here, we developed this assessment practice framework. My team developed that this past year, and each of our schools have set goals around that assessment framework. At our high school, they picked feedback as the area, and I think that comes into play with our students who aren't making growth, whether it's on this assessment or it's on the day-to-day classroom assessments. How do we give students key feedback that helps them grow from what they're not able to do to what they're able to do? So I know that's not specific to like one type of student, but I think that's what the research does show us makes a difference for all kids.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
That answers the question. It gives me context,
Yeah.
and it gives me kind of actions we need to take, and we'll keep an eye on the numbers for the next cycle.
Yeah.
I wonder if there would be interest in the student population, parent population, if the district could offer to those who fall in low income, maybe reduce some free lunch students or students that are identified by counselor in some SAT, ACT prep coursework, because I think that may be where you're also picking up some increased scores in
But-
those students who aren't in low income.
But we saw an increase in what the thing I'm talking about specifically, we actually saw an increase in growth in low income.
We did, but there's still a discrepancy. Like, and I think
Fair to consider.
Yeah, if that I guess that's a good point. It's just
I think it
that's-
really speaks to
these two
equity, like
numbers-
that we have, certain subgroups who diligently prepare for these tests, and then others who don't because they don't have the resources or they're not.
I just don't want to draw
encouraged.
I don't want to draw conclusions, right? I'm just saying there's data that shows me there's a gap, and rely on on the professionals to tell us the choices we can make as a board to help close that gap.
When it's
That's how,
not
that's
just
how I think about it.
And it's not just a gap, but to your point, it's a gap and moving in the wrong direction, at least in this last data set, which is where I guess I question. I mean, I appreciate the reliance on level 1 instruction, but it doesn't feel like that's connecting. So I wonder if there's another layer we need to go to say, you're not going to get a different result by doing the same thing.
Maybe it was incorrect of me to pick out low income as an example. We can pick out any where there is that discrepancy and target those students to have some preparation, like specific preparation, not because there is some within the general classes that they take, they have preparation, but just really not coming to the test and seeing that for the first time on that day.
Yeah, it's fair, and I would do just clarify. I don't think what Melissa is doing the same thing. I think when she talks about tier 1 and addressing what's happening in the classroom, we're talking about fundamentally doing different in the classroom to support the needs of the students. So doing the same thing would just be saying, hey, this was an anomaly for a year. Like, we think it'll pass if we just hang tight and move forward. I think it's a fair question to, I think, point out where there's some discrepancy and obviously drive the question of what can we do to change that trend, right? So.
And one thing probably to consider coming up, and I think other districts have already, or maybe it's other states have already encountered this, but I think there's going to be a change in the SAT testing coming, which could negatively impact those kids who haven't had some of the higher level courses. So I think we may see different, an impact here too. So lots to think about.
Thanks. Yeah, I think we're good.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. All right, our second topic is the initial community engagement update. Dr. Schuler.
just to kind of drive through a document that I want to use to take you through the initial report. I need to be up here because it's not in a set of slides. So in your green folders, you have a couple of documents that we're going to use this evening. So the first is a booklet-style document that's titled Initial Community Engagement Report, which is really what I'm going to walk you through tonight. And then you have a couple of different charts that I'm going to point out or take you to. And so I just want to remind you kind of where we are in the engagement process. So we're not done, right? I think the board's expectation or understanding was that the final engagement report is going to come to you in December. So this is an interim report, not intended for any kind of action tonight, but just to give you kind of a temperature check on where we are and the final steps really as we move forward. So I'll take the board back and kind of anchor you on last spring when the board, after reviewing some concept drawings for each of the 3 schools that addressed some of the priority areas, specifically asked us to kind of take a pause on any of the concept design and really embark on this engagement process, which we did. I want to say as we move through here, there's some elements of engagement that our team fully equipped to do on our own, and some aspects of engagement that we needed to get a little bit of help with to move through. So, and I'll speak to really kind of the 3 major components thus far, and just again help you understand why we've utilized a partner to help us in some of that work. So, just kind of setting priorities. So we've taken a couple of active steps since August to really engage the community and solicit that feedback. And in this initial phase, we did a couple of things. One, we refined or developed some messaging that was used in the presentations we did, both as a part of communications and the sessions that we did. We recruited a community-based committee to help serve as an engaged or informed participant. And again, I'll point out where that data sits as you look at some of the charts. We did hold 4 community engagement sessions, with one of those being virtual, again to kind of work through, discuss some of the messaging, identify some of the opportunities for improvement, obstacles, and then get some feedback. And then finally, we did conduct a scientific phone survey on what some of the improvements could look like, and ask community for their feedback. And again, I'll go through in just a little bit and kind of highlight why those 3 different strands are important as we move through. Important to know, and again, the board members, if you attended any of the community sessions to listen, we took a slightly different approach in terms of how we shared or presented the information at those engagement sessions. So we didn't simply present pictures or visuals showing either a medium or a high, option in some of the renovation. We took all of the work, the areas of focus, and we put it into kind of what we called a menu of project options. So we developed a menu of really 10 different kind of components or buckets of work that we wanted to improve. And those items in the menu moved across really all 3 of the schools, or in some cases not all 3 of the schools if there wasn't a need. But I think that was important in being able to both describe the work and solicit feedback in a little more comprehensive way. Important to note that in total, we engaged about 700 people through this first round of engagement thus far. That included, again, individuals that are part of the community leadership team, individuals that came and engaged with us at the in-person or the virtual session, and then community members that were engaged through that scientific phone survey. So next section in your document just summarizes some of the key messaging for you. I'm not going to go through that. You can certainly read that off of the document. And again, what you'll see is that that really mirrored the kind of the introductory slides to the presentations that we did. And again, just a reminder that there have not been any decisions made to point. This is really our opportunity to solicit or get some feedback. So menu survey. What was the menu survey? reason why we took really a three-pronged approach to the community engagement is to make sure that as the board sees data and feedback, you see it really from kind of three what I will call parallel or different groups within the community. One, we wanted to get feedback from individuals that have been highly engaged with us. Those that serve on the community leadership team have spent a lot more time with us, learning, understanding, providing feedback, asking questions. They're naturally a little bit more informed in the work we're doing, the why behind that work. Right? Two, we wanted to identify a segment in the community that had a little bit of information. If they came to one of the sessions, certainly they're more informed than somebody that's just getting a telephone survey with very little background information, because there's a presentation that sets a context, a why, some of what we've done. So I would categorize that as kind of like the medium informed group. And then three, we really wanted to identify or get feedback from individuals with really very little context, right? To really truly understand just gut level response as you hear about these projects and as you think about what's important for your schools within the community, what's your impression of these 10 buckets of work, and then your impression of some of the finance elements that that are associated with it. So again, as I walk through, I want to point out that the places where you're going to find those three sets of results, right? So number one, there is, actually, let me just go down to it. Right, this chart that's up on the screen right now, you have a copy of it. This is your feedback that came from the telephone survey. So the scientific-based telephone survey, that feedback is reflected on this chart. Second chart that says CUSD200 feedback form summary community engagement is the feedback, the collective feedback from any of the in-person or virtual opportunities, and then anybody that took the survey simply off of the engagement site. And then the third chart you see that's labeled community leadership team. That's our leadership team that we brought together a couple of times at the end of last year, and then together 2 more times at the beginning of this year. And again, they took the same survey that those that came to our sessions took, but we separated out the feedback again because it's just slightly different level of engagement, right? So just wanted to orient you to those 3 charts before I walk through. Second and last thing that I want to mention right after your summary report, you have this menu ranking. Again, this was the menu ranking that was given at every one of the sessions. So after learning about the projects, we asked individuals that had joined us to put them in a rank order, 1 to 10, 1 being your highest area of priority, 10 being for you the lowest area of priority. Did not signify that it wasn't the project that you would potentially support or find value in. It just did a forced choice ranking so we get an immediate feel for where folks are. So this is that menu option that was in there. So let me just talk to you a little bit about some of the feedback that came, right? Important to note, just at the onset, especially within the scientific-based survey, very first question that was asked in the phone survey was individuals' general impression of the school district. So it asked a very simple question just to understand at a high level community reaction to the school district, what's called a favorability rating. And I do want to point out or share with the board that in that phone survey that, again, set up to mirror demographic within the community, 79% of the district residents reported that they do have a favorable impression of or a favorable opinion of the school district, with only 14% of those responding holding a negative opinion, right? And so those were individuals that indicated that they either had a very strong favorable rating or favorable rating of the district, kind of same on the other side. And I do want to just point out that the group that conducted the survey for us shared very clearly that that's a very high favorable rating. Just important to know in the context of generally school kind of satisfaction pieces, when you have a what's called a net favorability rating of plus 65, that meaning those that respond positively to those that respond negatively, that's a strong favorability rating within the district. As you get into the individual projects, again, I want to remind you that there were 10 projects that were tested through this process, whether it was via phone or in those in-person opportunities. There were none of the project buckets that did not receive what would be called a positive or a plus support rating, meaning more people said, yes, I would support that area of work. I have a positive opinion of you doing that, than those that indicated a negative one. Which again, just big picture, while you're still going to see a difference in how people kind of rank the individual project buckets, there was no bucket of those 10 that community said, I don't support, I don't have a positive viewpoint on that work. Of the projects that were tested, there were 2 that very clearly kind of emerged as top priority. This was true both phone survey and in any of the in-person surveys. That included safety, security, and infrastructure, and mechanical. Just interesting to note, as you look at the 3 different groups, that the more engaged people are, meaning those that sit on the community leadership team or those that came in person, tended to lean heavier toward the infrastructure and mechanical. Those that answered via the phone survey tended to lean a little heavier to the safety and security over the infrastructure and mechanical, but by far, those were the 2 project buckets that received the highest level of feedback. There were 3 areas or 3 buckets that kind of fell into that next echelon of rating. Those 3 included special education accessibility, science lab classrooms, and then general classroom improvement. And again, just interesting to note in that feedback report that level of support, especially from the general public, so not the engaged group that spent time, but from the general public, especially as you ask questions around special education and accessibility, it is pretty notable feedback because they don't typically see that in their survey. That does not always test as positively as it did certainly in our survey. So it would certainly indicate a strong support for that project bucket, at least in this first round of survey. So special education accessibility, science lab classrooms, and classroom improvements coming in next. The remaining 5 projects, again, that I indicated all had a level of support as you looked at positive feedback versus negative, but through a lower priority. Really were not significantly separated in the level of feedback from the community, but if you did put them kind of in this kind of close order of priority, they would have included performing arts, music spaces next, library learning centers, then indoor athletic PE spaces, student service spaces, and then the building layout and collaborative spaces tested out really on the bottom. After the survey on the project buckets, then went in both on the phone survey and in the in-person survey to ask for some feedback on financial elements. And so again, we laid out really 4 different financial scenarios that range from making no new investment at all, right, not investing at all into the facilities, to a low level of financial investment that would have taken care of the capital, the infrastructure. We had a cost estimate number from the previous concept drawings that were done, to a medium level that represented a little higher level of investment, would have taken care of a good chunk of the projects, but not likely everything in those 10 project buckets, and then a high level option that would have addressed all of it. Important to know that only 5% of survey respondents indicated they didn't support any level of additional funding. So that by far was the lowest level of response, was those indicating they didn't think there was a need to do that. Well, 89% of the respondents did support at least one of the funding levels. which again, good sign in terms of at least the understanding around the need to make some investment. Another significant result from this initial phase is the level of support, though, around that high funding level. And typically, higher funding levels receive stronger support from those that are more engaged, that have spent more time, but tend to receive lower ratings from those less engaged that are participating just through the phone survey. And again, in our survey, that wasn't the case. All three groups tested indicated or ranked the highest funding level first, then the medium funding level, and then the low funding level, although it should be noted that the gap between those levels was certainly narrower when you looked at the phone survey of the general public than it was when you looked at the community engagement or the leadership team, right, that's a little more engaged. Again, you have all of the data. Really, my goal tonight was just to help you see what you have in front of you after the initial phase. Make sure if you have any questions around kind of methodology or how we relied at this information. I do just want to highlight that really the next step after you've had a chance to digest this, certainly for our team, is going to be to take this initial set of data and again just come back to some of the options that we've created. By options we've created, really, if we were to take kind of these 9 project buckets, put them together, address all of them, and we had a cost estimate of this, right? What's kind of level of support or feedback around that? So it's now to start taking some of these buckets, kind of intermixing them, especially at the medium level, and in essence retest, right? Do a second round of survey to again either confirm or understand if there is kind of different feedback around it, so that again you as a board have all that information when we come back to you in December, and then seek direction on kind of where we go in finalizing or refining concept plans. So I'm going to stop there and answer any questions that you have on what you have with you or methodology.
I have 2 questions. For the number of participants that, whether through the community engagement sessions or the phone survey, provided this feedback, how does that compare with either prior surveys or other districts? Is that relatively high sample size or low?
Yeah, so I think one important to note on the phone survey, so the scientific-based survey, that is consistent. So that is set up to be a valid, reliable survey that mirrors demographic in the community so that you have a high level of confidence in the reliability. So I'm going to tell you that was targeted for a very specific number to give you a data set that you can be comfortable with, right? So obviously, idea you want to get to a sample size that gives you a confidence that if you replicated that with another 500 people, it's very likely you're going to get a data set that's going to shape about the same way within a pretty tight level of confidence interval. The in-person piece, really from what I've understood, it's been pretty consistent with what I think you would see when you kind of open up an engagement opportunity. It's the reason we did both. I don't know that I would be fully confident if I were you as a board basing decisions simply based on, we appreciate the effort and the engagement of the 100 people that came out either in person or virtually, but I don't think you have a rich enough data set simply from that. I think it was a good number. We got a good number out that I don't think was inconsistent. But I will tell you, certainly on the phone survey, you can be comfortable in the data set that you have.
And then there were a few categories where the company we used told us how we related to other districts, or this is what we generally see, you above that. Was there any kind of benchmarking on the funding options, just to give us context of how to interpret those data?
I think that would be difficult to compare across districts because that is really unique to the individual district, right? Like what your funding level is, what else is happening that sort of indicates what the impact, right, of that piece is. So I think where you have comparable data are in questions that are asked consistently across all surveys, right? General, level of favorability, right, in those pieces, and just some of the general kind of reaction to projects. I don't think you could do that across funding levels because I think that's pretty unique to
Okay.
a project.
Did we have any sort of favorability feedback before either the failed or the successful Jefferson referendums to know at what percent the community said yay versus nay?
We had an understanding, so not favorability just to the district, favorability around projects. We did do a survey in front of the 2017 referendum. That was sort of the larger referendum. It was a much tighter margin than I think what you see in some of this data set, with a much bigger confidence interval, not as tight of a confidence interval. I could get that for you from that surveying that we did.
This scale, like can you help interpret?
Yeah.
Like what does it? I'm just looking at community engagement, 2.37 for infrastructure.
Yep.
7.1. What does that mean?
Yep. So Dave, remember, anybody that came out to one of the sessions rated the 10 project buckets, right? They put a 1 next to one of them, a 2 next to one of them, a 3 next to one of them, all the way down to 10. This is giving you an aggregate rating from all that participated in that survey. So low is better, right? Low means that project bucket received the highest number of low number ratings, meaning it rose to people's level of priority.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure I am interpreting that right. So where it's 2.37 for infrastructure and mechanicals, that means that was the average across all the respondents.
Correct.
And that's the same on the funding?
Correct.
Between 1, 2, and 3?
Correct. 1, 2, 3, and 4.
And 4. All right, thanks. That's helpful.
Yeah, and then same on the community leadership team, just a different data set.
Any other questions, board?
I do just want to mention, separate from presentation that Melissa did a little bit earlier, the other reason why I have Julie Ozymkowski here is that I wanted to make sure, as we understood this data before it came back to you tonight, that we had a level of confidence certainly within the district and kind of the data and what went into this. And so Julie's here because she will affirm or will attest, somebody who's much smarter than I am in the data and analytics space, very, very comfortable with the data set you have in front of you. I did ask Julie to be here just in case there were any questions that went way over my head, which wouldn't be difficult.
Thank you, Julie.
Now I'm trying to think of a hard question.
Uh-oh. Shouldn't have said that.
I do have one question on the kind of descriptions of the projects. You know, it's so hard to visualize and understand what it is. I just think about going to Johnson and seeing the Library Learning Center, transformation, right? And until you see it, it's really hard to kind of grasp the magnitude of change. And so I don't know how we achieve that. Maybe we ask our partners to help us think through how we help people understand what it means, the Library Learning Center, which was the lowest on the phone survey, right? Because we all kind of have our own opinion of what a library looks like, but until you see the Johnson Center, you're like, whoa, wow, I see what that means now, right? Collaborative space and the different types of learning that can go on. It's just it's hard to conceptualize on a piece of paper. But so just maybe some help on that.
Yeah, I think fair, Rob, and I didn't jump ahead, but I guess I do just want to mention that as we move forward in terms of some decision and concept design, with every layer of kind of deeper design within a project, you're going to come closer to some visuals that are going to help to be able to see it. And we actually struggled with that even in the presentation that we did as part of the engagement, because the effort was to show some pictures that might help to bring a little bit of visual, but I think we got some feedback even from our leadership team that
they weren't pictures from inside of District 200 schools, and so that felt a little kind of inauthentic, right? To show that the Library Learning Center was one space where we were able to do that because we had visuals from Johnson and from Whittier to actually show a redesigned space. We don't necessarily have that with the Science Lab yet, but
I absolutely get it.
Yeah,
Understand
it's
that.
fair
And
point.
where we're at in the process. I was just thinking as we go
Yeah.
forward, I just know from my own
Yeah.
experience that was tough to conceptualize.
it makes a lot of
You know,
sense.
and I saw a lot of pictures too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but it's different when you're in the space. So I don't know if it's descriptions or
Yeah.
but I mean, I'm not going to try to solve the problem, but it's a challenge for me at least.
Which leads me to a question.
Yeah, sure.
So we sort of took a break from the conceptual layout and what things would look like. When will we return to that?
I would anticipate after December. So I would prefer to bring you kind of final feedback report around engagement, and then get some direction and feedback with the board to return to those concepts and what we want to accomplish, and dive a little bit deeper into the design.
Okay, thank you.
So, and really, I think in the timeline that we had mapped out for you, you can take as much time as you need, but we can design the engagement process so you have December, I think, really till end of the year to really then focus on decision points.
Thank you. And then I'm assuming that the Monroe concept in collaboration with possibly the Park District is not a viable option, or?
We haven't done anything more with it yet. Again, we kind of wanted to see how even some of the like physical education athletic spaces tested out. We're kind of low middle of the pack here, so I wouldn't say that we can't come back and sort of revisit perhaps how we look at layout of some of the athletic spaces there, but we haven't done anything more with it for the time being.
Thank you.
Just a comment. At one of the community engagement sessions that I was at, an astute community member had done the math and said, hey, the sum of the costs on the different initiatives exceeds the funding options. And I think the answer was essentially, as you'd expect, economies of scale, some overlap. I think that may be an interesting thing to tease out as this moves forward, to help people understand that there are some synergies to be found as you weave this together.
Yeah, I was just thinking about trying to understand. I was thinking about our coffee on the Saturdays at the middle schools, and Ms. Bednar just explained to us how learning would be different in the space. I thought that was really a cool example. It helped me understand just what she faces day to day in her building and how things might change. And that was tangible to me. Just a thought.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any, someone signed up for public comment? No one signed up? Okay. There being no further action to come before the board in open session. Board, I need a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting.
So motioned.
Moved by Mr. Jerpy, second.
Second.
Ms. Kelovitz. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.